Welcome back. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell, and leave a like. Enjoy the video. How can a caring father be mistaken for a kidnapper? This video explores the unsettling story of Marcus and the unexpected events that followed his wrongful accusation. Marcus's upbringing was shaped by the difficulties of being a foster child and the realities of growing up as a black kid in a system that frequently overlooked him. He faced the ongoing uncertainty of shifting from one home to another, never quite feeling at ease. Each move brought its own array of fears and anxieties. The additional challenge of racial identity made it even more complicated. In many of the homes where he lived, Marcus felt like he didn't belong. Some foster families struggled to grasp his cultural background, which left him feeling alone. He often encountered biases that left deep emotional scars, making it tough to find acceptance and a sense of belonging. In school, he endured bullying and discrimination, which further amplified his loneliness. Despite these challenges, Marcus discovered strength in his identity. He turned to the stories and experiences of his ancestors for motivation. He learned to embrace his heritage and history. He sought joy in the community, finding friends who shared similar struggles and could relate to the complexities of growing up black in America. The obstacles he encountered fueled his desire to create a better life for himself and others. He was resolved to break the cycle of instability and pain that he had known all too well. He envisioned a future where children could grow up feeling safe and loved, regardless of their background. After years of hard work and commitment, Marcus built a life brimming with love and purpose. He began helping foster children, believing that every child deserves a stable and nurturing environment. Each child brought their own story and challenges, and Marcus made it his mission to ensure they felt appreciated and understood. He invested countless hours listening to their fears, assisting them with homework, and teaching them the skills they needed to thrive. His commitment extended beyond mere care. It was about fostering a sense of community and trust. Marcus wanted the children to know they were not alone, that there was someone who believed in them. Marcus's journey as a father began when he chose to adopt two children, Mia and Jaden. They were siblings who had experienced the ups and downs of the foster care system. The children were white, a stark contrast to Marcus's own black heritage. But for him, race was never a barrier to love. He believed that family was defined by the connections of affection and care, not by skin color. When he brought Mia and Jaden home, he was filled with enthusiasm. He aimed to ensure they felt welcomed and cherished, so Marcus introduced them to his circle of friends and family. Every Saturday became a family day. They would visit the park, explore museums, or simply enjoy a movie night at home filled with popcorn and laughter. Marcus poured his heart into creating memories with his children, believing these moments would shape their understanding of love and belonging. He frequently shared tales from his own childhood, explaining how resilience and kindness had guided him through tough times. Their family faced challenges as Mia and Jaden had their own struggles stemming from their past experiences in the system. But Marcus approached every situation with patience and empathy. He would sit with them, discussing their feelings, always reassuring them that they were safe and loved. His gentle approach fostered an environment where they could express their fears and anxieties without judgment. His life took an unexpected turn when, during a meal at a restaurant, Jaden, who was 4 at the time, accidentally got spicy food in his eye. This led to an outburst of tears that resonated throughout the restaurant. As Marcus stepped out of the restaurant with his crying child, he had no idea that a simple act of paternal care was about to spiral into a nightmare. The cool evening air hit Marcus's face as he exited the restaurant, his son's cries gradually subsiding. He breathed a sigh of relief, grateful for the moment of calm. Little did he know this brief respite would be the last peaceful moment he'd experience for hours to come. As Marcus walked toward his car, a woman in a small sedan stopped next to him. She rolled down her window and asked for Jaden's parents. Marcus tried to keep his voice steady as he replied, "I'm his mom and his dad." He often used this line to clarify their family situation, hoping it would alleviate people's concerns. But he could see the skepticism in her eyes. She didn't believe him. Before he knew it, she was on the phone telling the police that a black man was with a white child who was crying. She claimed she suspected him of kidnapping. Then she immediately drove away. Marcus's heart sank as he realized what was happening. He could feel the situation spiraling out of control even before the police arrived. Just minutes later, a police cruiser approached at high speed. Initially, he thought nothing of it. After all, he was just a father comforting his child. But as the car came to a halt and two officers stepped out, a sense of dread began to creep over him. "Excuse me, sir," one of the officers called out, his hand resting on his belt. "We've received a report of a suspicious individual with a child. May we ask you a few questions?" Marcus's heart began to race. He'd heard stories of misunderstandings like this before. He never imagined he would find himself in such a scenario. "Of course, officers," he replied, striving to keep his voice steady. "I'm just out here with my son. He was getting a bit fussy inside, so we stepped out for some fresh air." The officers exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. "Can we see some identification, sir?" the second officer asked, his tone now tinged with suspicion. Marcus's stomach dropped as he realized he was not carrying the usual documents. "My ID is not with me." This immediately alarmed the officer, as one of them said, "Sir, I'm going to need you to stay right where you are," his hand now moving to rest on his holster. "Can you explain why you don't have identification on you?" As Marcus tried to clarify the situation, he could feel the tension escalate. His son, sensing the change in atmosphere, raised his head. Marcus instinctively reached to comfort him, but this simple gesture seemed to put the officers on edge. "Sir, I need you to put the child down," the second officer demanded, his voice sharp. Marcus felt a surge of panic. "But he's my son," he protested, his voice trembling with emotion. "Please, if you just let me prove my innocence." Before he could finish his sentence, one of the officers grabbed his arm, trying to separate him from his child. Marcus instinctively pulled back, clutching his son tighter. At that moment, everything spiraled out of control. The police officer withdrew, but his hand was now firmly on his holster. Marcus attempted to explain the situation as his heart raced. Onlookers began to gather. Whispers filled the air, and he could sense the growing distrust. "Please, if you just let me show you," he pleaded, but the officers remained unmoved. "Sir, we need you to put the child down." "We won't ask again," the second officer insisted, clearly becoming angry. Panic flooded through Marcus. "But he's my son," he yelled, desperation overwhelming his voice. Just then, Jaden, still sniffling, wriggled free from Marcus's arms and stepped forward. "Dad!" Jaden cried, his voice breaking. "I'm fine. He's my dad." But instead of reassurance, his words only fueled the crowd's suspicion. Gasps echoed around them, and a woman nearby shouted, "That's what a kidnapper would say." Marcus felt the ground shift beneath him. The officers exchanged glances, their disbelief evident. "We need to verify the situation," the first officer said, moving closer to Jaden. "This could be a ruse." "What are you talking about?" Marcus felt his voice tremble as he stepped toward Jaden, instinctively wanting to protect him. But the second officer blocked his path. The crowd began to murmur, some nodding in agreement with the officers. "Look at him. He doesn't even resemble that child," one man yelled. "He's just trying to manipulate the system," another added. Marcus felt the weight of their words crash down on him. He looked at Jaden, whose innocent eyes reflected confusion and fear. "I'm not trying to deceive anyone. I'm his father." But nobody seemed to hear him. All they saw was a black man holding a white child, and their assumptions had already taken root. "Step away from the child," one officer shouted, his voice booming. The atmosphere was charged with hostility. No one came forward to support Marcus. Instead, the crowd leaned in closer, their faces contorted with judgment. "Look at him," a woman whispered to her friend, her voice dripping with disdain. "He's probably got a criminal record. Maybe he's part of some trafficking ring," another added. Eyes wide with fear, the accusations felt like daggers piercing Marcus's heart. He felt utterly isolated, surrounded by hostility with no allies in sight. Jaden looked up at Marcus, his small face filled with concern. "Dad, what's happening?" he asked, filled with innocence. Marcus knelt, desperate to calm his son. "It's okay, buddy, I'm here," he murmured. But the words felt hollow. As more officers arrived, the situation rapidly spiraled out of control. "This isn't what it looks like," Marcus shouted, feeling his voice crack under the weight of despair. "I'm just a father." But his pleas fell on deaf ears. Officers began to handcuff him, the cold metal biting into his skin. The crowd erupted in disbelief. "Lock him up! He's a criminal!" someone yelled, and others echoed the sentiment, their voices rising in a frenzy. "Dad," Jaden cried again, his eyes brimming with tears. "Please don't let them take you." But even that plea didn't sway the crowd. They were too entrenched in their beliefs, too eager to assign blame without knowing the truth. As Marcus was led away, the weight of their judgment crushed him. "I swear I'm not a kidnapper," he yelled, but the words were lost to the crowd. Jaden's terrified face haunted him as he was taken to a police car. Suddenly, more chaos erupted when Mia, his daughter, burst out of the restaurant, tears streaming down her face. "Dad!" she cried, her small voice breaking through the crowd's noise. The sight of her only escalated matters. "Look, there's another one!" someone shouted, pointing at Mia. "Kids. He kidnapped 2 white kids." The onlookers were filled with panic. Their eyes widened with a mix of fear and judgment. This solidified their beliefs about Marcus. Mia, running towards her father, stumbled as she reached him, falling into a sobbing heap. "I want to go home," she cried, reaching out for Marcus. But the officers restrained him, their expressions cold and unyielding. "Ma'am, step back," one officer commanded, pointing at Mia. "We need to sort this out. Please, she's my daughter," Marcus yelled, desperation clawing at him. But the crowd closed in, surrounding Mia, and the murmurs grew louder. Mia looked up at the officers, her face a mixture of fear and confusion. "He's my dad, I swear," she shouted. But the words fell flat in the charged atmosphere. The crowd remained skeptical, eyes darting between the children and Marcus. "Kids can be manipulated," a man said, crossing his arms. He probably told them to say that. The accusations seemed to gain momentum again. Everyone's eyes were filled with disgust as they looked at Marcus. As Mia tried to approach Marcus, an officer stepped in front of her. "Stay back, and we need to ensure these children are safe," he barked, gently but firmly pushing her away. "Safe from what?" Marcus cried, his heart aching as he watched Mia back away, her fear obvious. "I'm not a criminal. I've raised them. I love them." Suddenly, more officers started arriving. They jumped out of their vehicles and tried to manage the swelling crowd. But the situation was already spiraling out of control. "He's trying to kidnap them," a voice yelled, and others echoed. "He's a predator." With the crowd screaming this, Marcus felt the weight of hopelessness wash over him. Each accusation sliced deeper, reinforcing the false image painted of him. He watched Mia and Jaden, their faces filled with confusion and fear, and realized they were trapped in this nightmare too. "Please," Marcus shouted, his voice cracking. "Someone help us. I'm their father." But instead of intervention, the crowd grew angrier. "He's manipulating them," one woman yelled, pushing closer to the officers. As Mia held on to Jaden, their innocence caught in the crossfire of misunderstanding, Marcus felt utterly powerless. He could only watch as the officers began to question the children, their tones skeptical. "Where do you live? What's your last name?" one officer asked, his gaze hard and unyielding. Mia's eyes darted to Marcus, filled with fear. "I don't know," she said, obviously overwhelmed by the situation. Jaden chimed in. "But he's our dad. We love him." But the crowd felt confident in their assumptions. Whispers of conspiracy filled the air. "He's probably grooming them," someone shouted, and the group felt that this was correct. Marcus felt his heart shatter as he realized no one would believe them. All the love and effort he had poured into his family was being twisted into something sinister, something he couldn't control. The weight of the world bore down on him as he was taken further away from his children, their cries fading into the chaos. Then, from somewhere in the mass of people, a woman lunged forward and slapped him across the face. "You don't belong with them," she screamed, her voice filled with disdain. The shock of the blow left Marcus stunned. It was not only the pain but the deep feeling of betrayal. The crowd's hostility continued to escalate as the police struggled to manage the chaos while leading Marcus to the cruiser. Despite their efforts, onlookers pushed against him, shoving him roughly. Someone even landed a punch on his shoulder, adding to the physical assault. He was not just being accused, he was being physically attacked by the very people who were supposed to protect and support the community. As Marcus was about to be shoved into the police cruiser, a few familiar faces emerged from the crowd. People who knew Marcus, neighbors, friends, and members of his community pushed their way to the front, their expressions a mix of shock and concern. "Wait, that's Marcus," one of them shouted, trying to gain the officer's attention. "He's not a kidnapper. He's their father." But their voices were drowned out by the sea of accusations and anger. A woman who worked with Marcus at the community center stepped forward, raising her hands to calm the crowd. "I know this man," she called out firmly. "He's a good father. He's adopted those kids to give them a better life." Her words began to chip away at the problem, causing some onlookers to hesitate. Another man, a local store owner who often saw Marcus with his children, shouted, "I see him with those kids all the time. He's nothing but loving to them. You've got it all wrong." Slowly, the tide began to turn. People who had been hurling accusations moments before now looked uncertain, their angry expressions softening into confusion. "Are you sure?" someone asked, their voice shaking. "But why were the police called?" A neighbor who lived on Marcus's street stepped forward, her voice strong and clear. "This is a misunderstanding. Marcus has been taking care of these kids for years. He's a good man, and these are his children." Her certainty and sincerity pierced through the crowd's doubts. The murmurs of anger and suspicion began to fade as more people who knew Marcus spoke up, sharing stories of his kindness and dedication to his family. They described how he was always present at community events, how he volunteered at local shelters, and how he had been a role model for so many. Bit by bit, the atmosphere shifted. Those who had been quick to judge now looked away, ashamed of their earlier hostility. The crowd, once filled with rage, began to disperse, leaving only a few people. The police, sensing the change, loosened their grip on Marcus, exchanging glances of uncertainty. With each testimony, the true picture of Marcus emerged, one of a devoted father and a compassionate man. The initial image of a villain was shattered, replaced by the reality of a loving parent who had been wronged by a rush to judgment. As the crowd slowly began to dissipate, Marcus's supporters gathered around him, offering comfort and reassurance, helping to restore the dignity that had been stripped away. In those moments, the police officers, still tense but visibly uncertain, turned to Marcus's friends. "If you can provide proof of his relationship with the children, we'll review it immediately," one of the officers said, his voice softer now but still cautious. Marcus's neighbor quickly pulled out her phone, scrolling through photos of Marcus with Mia and Jaden at various community events. She showed the officers pictures of them at school plays, family barbecues, and neighborhood gatherings. "Look here, they are at the summer fair last month," she pointed out. "And this one's from their school's talent show. He's their father, not a kidnapper." Another friend stepped forward, holding out her phone. "I have videos of Marcus with the kids too. Here's one of them at the park just last week." The footage displayed Marcus pushing Jaden on a swing, while Mia laughed nearby. The clear bond between them was evident in every frame. As the officers reviewed the evidence, their behavior changed. The confusion in their eyes gradually gave way to understanding. Marcus's colleagues provided more information, documents confirming his adoption of Mia and Jaden, as well as testimonials from teachers and community leaders vouching for his character. One officer glanced at his partner, then back at Marcus, a look of regret on his face. "Sir, it appears we've made a mistake," he said quietly. "We're very sorry for the misunderstanding. We were just responding to the call we received, but it's clear now that you're their father." Another officer stepped forward, his expression filled with remorse. "We sincerely apologize for what you've experienced today. We understand how distressing this must have been, especially in front of your children." He gestured toward Mia and Jaden, who were now being comforted by Marcus's friends. "We never meant to cause you or your family any harm." Marcus, still shaken, nodded slowly, trying to process the rapid shift from being treated like a criminal to receiving apologies. "I just want my kids to be okay," he managed to say, his voice tight with emotion. The officers assured him that no charges would be filed, and they would make a formal report explaining the situation to prevent further misunderstandings. They even offered to escort him and his children home to ensure their safety. As the officers stepped back, giving Marcus some space, they looked around at the dispersing crowd, aware of the damage that had been done by their initial actions. "We truly regret how this unfolded," one officer added. "We hope you and your family can find some peace after this." The apology, though genuine, felt like a small balm on the deep wound of the ordeal. But as Marcus gathered Mia and Jaden into his arms, The relief of being able to hold his children again, free from suspicion, was overwhelming. He thanked his friends for their quick thinking and support, knowing that without them, the outcome could have been much worse. Here on Karma's Twists, we share the most impactful stories of karma and justice that the world needs to see. Don't miss a single moment of good triumphing over evil. Join our community and subscribe. Be part of the movement that believes justice always wins.